In Chapter 1 in CIST 1530, Web Graphics 1, we're going to look at getting started with Photoshop. What we'll do is we'll go through some of this PowerPoint presentation. We'll rotate between that and Photoshop and talk about some of the different settings and different things you can do with the program. I will start off with defining Photoshop as an image editing program. As you've got a wide variety of tools and settings that allow you to manipulate the digital images. Now, these images can be images you create, be images you find on the web, it's images you download from the internet, images you take from your phone, cameras. So there's a wide different range of places you can find these images. As we said, the images can be acquired from a variety of different devices. You can apply any basic processing procedures. You can improve the quality, the color of images. You can fix flaws, add special effects. You can also do a batch process for image files and output those to various devices. What that means is you can do the same task repeatedly to a variety of different images and then export those from Photoshop. So a digital image is going to be defined as a picture in electronic format. So this can maybe a file, a document, graphic, picture, image. You can create your original works in Photoshops. You can manipulate images. You can bring image into Photoshop from your camera, online sources that we've discussed. So every electronic image you have is going to be made up of small squares called pixels. So each pixel is going to represent a single color or shade. These are the smallest components of an electronic image. Now, one thing you'll have to know is camera resolution. That's the number of pixels per inch your camera can access to recreate the image. So once you take an image, once you take a photo, you create that digital image. So that light from that live image is going to be recreated digitally and it's going to be converted into those pixels. Now we'll get into looking at the preferences. So Photoshop gives you a lot of ways where you can customize the software the way that you feel the most comfortable using this. So these are set up your preferences. We'll look at our preference dialog boxes here. So we can see our general preferences that we can set. We can set our cursor preferences, how our guides and grids and slices. We can also set our system preferences and our spotlight search, for example. So looking at Photoshop now, if we open up the files for chapter 1, we can set our preferences if we go to edit and then come down to preferences. And you'll have different options here that you can set for this. So for example, looking at our general preferences in here, we can choose our color picker. We got different options here. Now, legacy free transform, we're going to talk about that. So Photoshop has changed the way you transfer images from previous versions. So I'm going to leave this unchecked right now. So I'm going to transform this image. Now I'm just going to scale it. So I'm just resizing this image. So you see when I go to the corner that my icon turns into that little double-sided arrow. And when I click, that it maintains the same proportions. It maintains the same height and width. The ratio stays the same. Okay, so if I don't want to do that, if I want to make this, say, change the width, but keep the same height. Now, see, if I'm doing it from the side here, each one of these little anchor points, the way Photoshop transforms this is that this happens when you just click the mouse button and drag. So if I want to just change say the width and leave the height alone, I need to hold down the shift key and then click and drag. And so this allows me to change the height or the width without changing the other. It unlocks the aspect ratio. You'll also see an option bar at the top here, and you'll see that you have right here where you have the maintain aspect ratio. You can also unclick that And then you can also transform this. Now with the transformation I just did there, I did not hold down the shift key because I have unlocked the aspect ratio here. So basically that's what the legacy transform does. So if I go in and I change the preference to use the legacy free transform. So what this does is now that I can just click on the arrow or the arrow on the anchor points and I can transform this. It does not maintain the aspect ratio. So I do not have to hold down shift key by using the legacy free transform. This is something that's really going to be a personal preference for you. Myself, it took a while for me to get used to the new way they transformed. I was using the legacy free transform back before it was a legacy. So this was the options that we had to transform is the aspect ratio was turned off. It does make this easier to keep everything proportional by using the new transform. But that is a preference. It's going to be up to you. I would recommend using the legacy free transform to start off with. And as you get more comfortable using Photoshop, then start winging yourself off of using that and using the new transformation. But we also have other preferences you have in here. For example, the guides. So you can choose the different colors for the guides, the inches and so forth. We will look at rulers and everything, guides later on. These preferences, though, these are where you can customize Photoshop. We'll also look at the tools in here where you can choose different options for your toolbar. These are the tools that you'll use for Photoshop. Those can be customized. You'll see that some of these have these little arrows in the corner that let you know that there are tools underneath them. If you hold down the mouse button, you can select other tools that are underneath this. So we'll go through each one of these tools. Now we'll look at creating a new document. All right, so when you start Photoshop, you're going to create a file from scratch. You'll use the new document dialog box. Now, a couple of things that you will set in that new document dialog box. You'll be setting the height and width, also with the number of pixels you'll use, and that is the image resolution. So we'll take a look at the new dialog box. So in this case, I'm going to go to File, New, and this will bring up my new document. You'll see that you have some recent items here. You also have some presets that you can use as well. And depending on which version of Photoshop you're using, it may look different. With Creative Cloud, you do have different versions that you can install. So it may be a different new document dialog box, but they all work the same. So example here, this one is 11 by 7 inches. So I've got this set in inches. I can also change this to, if I want to set an image, create a document in pixels. And I also have different options down here for measurements. The resolution is how many pixels per inch I can set. 300 something I would use if I'm doing something I'm going to print. Sometimes I've even used in personal use up to 600 for bigger print jobs. You can set the color modes, the background contents. So this is where you can set the background colors. Then you have some more advanced options we'll get into. So once you create this, you click create, and it'll create my new document. If it's untitled, I have a background in my layers panel, and your layers panel is going to be something that will be very important to make sure that we've learned this layers panel and how to work in it. You also see that my background layer is locked. It means anything I try to do will not take effect to these pixels. So each one of this layer is made up of pixels. So example, if I'm going to zoom in, to this, I can zoom in on each one of these individual pixels. Better example will be zooming in on this guy. As you start seeing the squares appear, that shows you the individual pixels that are used to make up this image. So I can manipulate these individual pixels to change the images. Now, there are a couple ways you can arrange documents in Photoshop. So for example, this one here is just one image open at a time, and you'll see those tabbed like I currently have here. I can also open up multiple at once. So some advantages of doing it like this would be, and I can resize these windows as well. So if I'm taking a layer from one image and putting it into the other, this is one way I can easily click on the eagle, see the layers over here that I'm going to work with, and I can just click and drag this to the other window. And you'll see that it's been added to his layer as well and to this image. So it's a way I can quickly transfer um, items from one image to another. So this is something, once again, it's preferences. I can also, and this is my preference, the way I do this, is if I needed to copy him over to the parrot, I just click and drag it to the tab, and it brings it open, and I can drop him in. So once again, Photoshop's giving you multiple ways to accomplish the same task. This is something that's going to be your preference on how you set up your documents. But you can have them set up where they're arranged side by side or they're floating. Now we've talked about how you can open existing documents, how you can get documents into Photoshop, whether it comes from your phone, the web, or so many other different places. So once you open these up in Photoshop, you do have those images are editable by the Photoshop's features. So to open an image, you go to File and Open, navigate to wherever your images are saved. For example, if I was going to say open up image in from another textbook, I can do this, and that opens the image up. And once they're opened up in Photoshop, I do have access to edit those however I need to. Now, there are a couple different ways that we can save a file. You have different options for this. So if you want to save a copy, you want to save your original, but you've made changes. For example, if I decide this guy needs a blue streak on his bill, and I put a blue streak, but I want to save the original. If I go to File, I would use Save As or Save a Copy and not use Save. So Save will overwrite my original file, Save As makes a copy of it, and then Save as a Copy does the same. Save As allows me to rename the file or change the file location. And you also notice that I do have this option up here that I can undo steps in Photoshop as well. Makes it a lot easier. You don't have to worry about messing up something because you can always go back and undo it. Now, when you save a file in Photoshop, you have to choose the file format. There are different options you have in this. If you save it just as a Photoshop file, it's going to be saved as a PSD file. That is something that's going to be a proprietary format. So it is Adobe's format for the Photoshop file. Now, when you do this, it saves the file as a Photoshop format. It's going to save all of the elements that's taken place in there that you've worked on. And it's got no compression and it's no loss of image quality when you save as a Photoshop format. Now, when you save as other formats, you may have a small loss of quality. You won't have the individual layers that you can work on. For example, we'll go back to the eagle since we have two layers of the eagle here. So in the eagle, if I draw on this eagle, I've still got my background layer. We're going to resize this eagle so that we can see the layer underneath him. And I'm going to create another layer. And create a text layer. So all of these now have created another layer. So if I save this as say a JPEG or a PNG file, all of this is going to be combined into one image. If I save it as a Photoshop file and I open this back up in Photoshop, each one of these layers are going to be still there. So I can still go in and decide I don't like the text there, or I don't like the eagle with the line on his head. So I can go back in and still work on the project that I've been working on. It's not going to be combined into one image. Now, if I save this as, for example, if I go to File and Save As, and then choose the Save As type, down here I can change different types. Then it's going to combine all of these layers into one image. One of the things I do when I'm saving an image, when I'm finished editing the image, is I go to export. This is where you'll want to go to actually change the file's preference. So if you go to export, now I use a quick export as PNG a lot, but you also can use the export as. Now in the export as, you can choose the file format. So I can change this to a GIF, a JPEG. I can change the sizes of the image. I put more, metadata into this, the copyright and contact information, and then just click export. So that's my personal preference way of getting images out, instead of doing the save as, and then trying to change the save as type. So JPEGs is the Joint Photographic Experts Group. It's a widely used format, something that's going to be used for web graphics. It is a really compatible file type for other programs other than just Photoshop. Now, TIFF is a tagged image file format. What this does, it saves Photoshop files in their existing state. So it'll save those files with those layers intact. Now, this is a non lossy compression. That means a compression algorithm that makes the file smaller without degrading the image data in any way. GIF is a graphics interchange format. It is a lossy compression created in the 1980s. This is not really a format you want to use. It doesn't save the layers. It heavily compresses the image. PNG is a portable graphics format. It's a relatively new format, and it was created to replace the GIF files. Now, one of the big benefits of this is it is a lossless format. It doesn't degrade the quality of the image like a JPEG or a GIF will. this is something that you really want to use only when you're finished with the artwork. It's not something that you want to do if you're trying to um, go back, because it doesn't save the in progress Photoshop options. So PSD format, that's what you want to use when saving Photoshop documents. It's going to save everything with no loss of quality. That is also what you want to submit to me in the Dropbox. Okay, I need to see your layers when I open up your file. So you'll be submitting the PSD documents in Blackboard. Now, the large document format, the PSB, that's for images that are over 2 gigabytes. This is something else that is also a proprietary Adobe format. We looked at the save and save as. Now, the toolbar, that presents a tool with an icon representing a function. So, for example, we looked at the zoom tool, it shows a magnifying glass when I zoomed in on this image. So we have our zoom tool, and you have a whole bunch of different tools. And once again, the little arrow in the right-hand corner of this will give you options for other tools that are underneath that. So the tools that are on top are not always the only tools that are available. And you'll see over here also, when you look at these, you'll see a letter on some of these tools. That is your keyboard shortcut. And if you have them multiple like this with a J, let me get off that one. So if I, see this icon change. As I'm going through here and choosing different options. So you can use a keyboard shortcut like move tools V. So if I'm on an eraser tool and I need to go to the move tool, I can just hit V on my keyboard, and it will select the move tool or whatever tool I have selected. So it could be the move tool or the artboard tool, whichever is selected up there. So it's very important to learn these keyboard shortcuts. It will save you a lot of time when working with Photoshop. A couple other things about the toolbar is that you'll notice that when you place your mouse pointer over it, you do get a little pop-up. It's going to show you what that tool does. And I'll give you a demonstration of the tools. The option panel, we looked at just a second ago when we looked at the aspect ratio. This is something that's going to be directly located right underneath the menu bar, and it's going to show you the options that you have for that currently selected tool. So for example, with the lasso tool, you'll see that I have different options here of, let me unlock this. So if I'm making a selection of this eagle's head, you'll see that I have options up here to add to the selection, remove from the selection, intersect. I can choose the feather, which is like how much it bleeds over, um, and so forth. And these are going to change based off the tool you have selected. So if I have the brush tool, you'll see that I choose the size of the brush, the opacity, how much I can see through that. For example, right now at 100%, if I paint this eagle's head versus it being at 45, and you see how it changes based on the opacity setting. So these are options you can use to further customize how your tools work. So the move tool, this allows you to move images around. There's a lot of different ways you can use the move tool. So if I have just the layer selected, I can move the entire layer. I can move a selection. So if I have a selection here made and I use the move tool, I can use it to move just that selection. I can use it to place images in certain areas. There's a lot of different options I can use the move tool for. This is one of your mostly used tools. The zoom tool, once again, allows me to zoom in and also zoom out. I can also use the fit screen or the fill screen options. I can choose a level of magnet that I'm going to magnify the image with there. There's a lot of times you'll need to zoom in to work on pixels up close. For example, if I was cutting this out and I needed to use, say, the eraser tool, I would want to get close in and zoom in to the images. So I could remove those images that are there. Now, what just happened there is the reason why nothing would work is because I still had a selection. When I had that selection, I can only work within that selection. So if you have that ever happen, you need to make sure you go to select and deselect. So back to the move of the zoom tool. So if I'm going to erase pixels, I want to make sure that I can get in and erase only the colored pixels I need. So I need to be able to zoom in and out of the image. Now you can also customize your toolbar settings. You can have those set up as a single setting like I have here. You can also drag these to whatever location you would wish to have them docked at. My preference is having them located on the left-hand side. And you can also change different options here. You can also come in and edit the toolbar. I have no options to edit the toolbar at this time. If you're ever missing your toolbar or any of your panels that you need, you can always come to Window and come in and make sure everything is turned on. So, for example, if my toolbar is missing, I can make sure I check that. You can also set up different workspaces here. So they've got different options for workspaces. These are preset layouts. So if I'm looking at the photography layout, I can use it. Motion would give me a timeline where I can create small videos. So there are all kinds of different options you can have for setting up your own layout for Photoshop. It allows you to customize your workspace. Now you can also move those panels around. All right, so these panels that are located over here, you can drag those to different locations. You can redock those with different panels. So when you dock these, you'll see that the panel gets that blue outline around it. It allows you to drop that in that panel. It allows you to also, as I said, you can move the entire groups of panels. You can close tab groups. You have a wide variety of ways that you can customize your workspace. And if you ever decide that you don't like it, you can come into workspace and reset the workspace so it sets it back to the default layout. Now, rulers are going to be positioned at the top and down the left edge of your Photoshop workspace. These are used to help you measure out the exact placement for your images. Now, if you do not see the rulers, like I don't have them cut on, I can come to Windows, excuse me, and come to View, and then under Show, you have some different options here, but then I also want to click on the rulers. This will cut my rulers on, and we'll look at the guides and things extra in a minute. So the rulers are cut on, and you'll see them measured in different settings here. You can right click on the ruler and choose whether to have it measured in pixels, inches, millimeters, and so forth. So you can choose the type of measurements that are listed here. We talked about shortcut keys. There are thousands of them. There are a lot of shortcut keys. This is something that, for example, the transform key is Control T, whichever layer you have selected, you can now transform that layer. We have copy shortcuts. You have transform again shortcuts. You have save shortcuts. I mean, you have all kinds of different shortcuts, different tools, different options. There is a lot of shortcuts, and it does help speed up working with Photoshop to know the shortcuts. So we've talked about the workspace customization, how you can reset it, how you can set it up the way you want to. So we'll look at some different options here, the floating, some different color customization options that you have for Photoshop that we've already looked at, how you can move things around, resize images, obviously resize panels, change locations. Now the guides are non-printing horizontal and vertical lines that you can use to display on top of an image to help you position a selection. So to place a guide, you simply click on the left click on the ruler and drag the guide to the new location. Same with the top and bottom. So you can get a precise location. So if I want the T in this test to be at that intersection, it allows me to precisely place this. Now going back to the view option, if you want to change these off, now you also see the snap. All right, so it's going to kind of snap that image in to that area. And also for like placing images together, it'll snap them in. So you can change that, turn that snap off, and then it doesn't really snap there. But you'll see that these pink lines that are appearing let you know its spacing is there. Now to turn these off, you can come to the show and choose the guides, and you can cut the guides off. And if you want to see them again, you can come back in and cut those back on as well. You also see in here in the show that you can turn a grid on, that you can use that to as another guide for placement of images. And you can cut all of them off by choosing the extras option and cutting it off on the view. And this is a couple things you can use this for um, precisely placing images. For example, here, if you wanted to rotate an image and place it at the center point. So in here, I can find the center point of my document, which is a 7-inch, so 3.5. And this document is going to be 10, so I'll put it at 5. So that right there will be my center point. So this allows me to rotate this image. And get him exactly where I want him to be. So if I want his eye right on the center point, for example, it allows me to precisely place the image as I need to. All right, so let's go finish up chapter 1. In this chapter, we've looked at different options for Photoshop, different workspaces. We looked at different types of files, how to open a document, save a document, the different file formats, and also the different options such as the rulers and guides and so forth.